Hi everyone, welcome back into the studio. Okay, so for all you beginners and advanced painters that want to have a little bit more knowledge about the acrylics, let me just break some simple things down. A little bit of chemistry, a little bit, and to help you understand what happens in acrylics. The first thing that you need to know is not all acrylics are the same. Yes, they say acrylic. All that means is they clean up with soap and water. How they dry, how flexible, how fast they dry, and what you can do with them, the quality of them are all different. Now I know this because I have been making acrylic paint systems as a chemist since 1983. So a long time. And I've made different kinds of ones. I've made bottled acrylics, which perform absolutely different than what the acrylics that I use today. They do not work for what we do. But I want to show you how you can adjust your acrylics to make some things work better. Okay, first let's understand. This is the tube that I use, the paint that I use. This is Jansen art. This is what I developed. This particular line, I developed quite a few different paints over the years. And in 2008, I worked with the Deravan company out of Australia, and we developed this particular type of paint, which is what I use today for everything that I do. It's 100% acrylic. Now, what makes this difference is it uses artist quality pigments, the same pigments you'll find in oils. But inside every tube here, not only do you have a little bit of water, which it will help make it acrylic, but something else that's really, really important, and we classify it as media. And media is this type of stuff, this right here, this one right here. This is our extender medium. Now, most bottled acrylics, I'd say 90% of bottled acrylics out there, the crafting acrylics, do not have this in it, which means they will not work the same. They will dry very fast on you, and you cannot do extended type of blending techniques with them. You can do some, but you have to be able to work very fast. So inside these tubes, there's a lot of difference to it. And over the course of, maybe a year's worth of lessons here, I'm going to really educate you about the market, because there are some good things that you can do with those as well, okay? Now, acrylics. So I have out here, this is the Paint It Simply, the 6 colors of the Paint It Simply. This is an acrylic, which means it's water is its solvent, okay? Now I can adjust it to blend all different kinds of things. And I do in all different kinds of lessons. Let me show you, okay? So over here I have this painting. I did this painting. I always serial coat, I just put my numbers over here on my paintings. And so I know I painted this in December of 2013. It was my 466th painting of that particular year. I usually do 300 to 400 paintings a year is what I try to do. But this one, I used a modified blending technique, and I modified the Dutch blending technique to give a little bit more interest and stuff to the peaches and to the Spanish grapes that I like here. I've always loved the Dutch, and you can see some of the big Dutch that I do back there. I've done over 40 paintings of the Dutch style, all in acrylic, emulating the old master style. And, I have some free lessons on our other channel for doing that. This one I did a few years earlier in 2010, and it was an Abraham Mignon study. And you can see I blended out the peach here a little bit softer. The Spanish grapes here are a little bit softer, blended out, smaller, softer color exchanges and stuff than what I have over here. And what I was trying to do with this painting, and it was my first step towards it, was take the Dutch technique a little bit more to the 20th or 19th century impressionistic technique. And I do that by controlling my acrylics. And I can do that. I can slow them way down and blend, smooth blend, or I can do this type of work here. And I'd like to show you how you go about doing that. First off, your surface is one of the most important things that you have here. How your acrylics react to the surface. Acrylics dry through the air, and they also dry from underneath through the surface, okay? So if you're allowing a lot of water penetration into the surface here, the acrylics will dry faster. Okay? If you lock it off with a sealer or something like that, the acrylics will dry slower. because they're only drying one direction from the top. That's the first thing you have to remember. I like to use it this way. Now, what is it that I use? Let me grab this real quick here, because I left it over there on the other side of my studio. This is the boards that I like to paint. A lot of you asked it, and I have videos on the channels on how to prep stuff. This is an MDF panel, and I buy it in big 4x8 sheets of wood, and then I cut it into the size I want. You can also buy these as hardboard from like Dick Blick and some of the different places online on Amazon and stuff. You just look for hardboard, artist hardboard, and you can buy them. It's a couple bucks for a 14x18 or something like that. I also use this. This is these are wooden ply panels that I use. I love this. This is an oak ply panel. I use this when I want to give a really high quality painting. It's 1/4 inch thick, so you can see it's thicker, and it doesn't warp as easy or anything like that. But these are very absorptive surfaces, so the first thing that I do if I'm going to blend or if I'm going to want my acrylics to dry a little slower is I start to lock some of that off. And the one product that I use is this right here, the Canvas Prep Medium. This is made for canvas, but it also works very, very well on wood surfaces. So I take this board here and I just give it one coat. Now what I did with this is I also mixed in a little bit of brown, so I got this light tan color. But I mixed that up, put one coat on it. You can sand it lightly with light sandpaper, but what this does is it fills up some of the matte surface qualities of the wood, and so what it's going to do is start to slow dry your acrylics a little bit. Now, what's the difference between that and a sealer? I'll make a specialized video for you on sealers. Sealers are quite a bit different, but let me just show you here. Okay, I'll take out, what does a sealer do? Okay, I'll take out a little bit of the sealer here, put this out. Sealers are thin. I'm going to show you, I love this sealer. I spent a lot of time developing this sealer. It is a beautiful sealer. It's also a urethane varnish. You can varnish stuff with it as well. But I'll come right down here, okay, and I'll give a coat of sealer over this surface, and we'll let it dry here for a few minutes here. So in the video here, we'll let this dry for a few minutes, and we'll see the difference, what a sealer does. The sealer goes in there, it soaks in, and it's going to make the surface harder, and no moisture is going to penetrate the wood whatsoever. Okay, I'll explain to you why I like certain surfaces for different techniques as we get going, as we learn. But a lot of questions that you ask me. Okay, so some of you that are very beginning. Can I practice on cardboard? Yes, but you're wasting your time. Okay, let me show you something. Okay, here I brought in a piece of cardboard. I get this question at almost every video. People go, "Well, I have a hard time, but I'm practicing with some bottled acrylics on cardboard." If you're practicing with bottled acrylics on cardboard and trying to paint one of my roses or trying to paint a peach, for example, right there, you will not be able to do it, because you're using the surface here that is really, really absorptive, okay? And it's cheap, so it's absorptive. The only way that you can make this surface any better is to maybe give it a coat of sealer, okay? And you can look at this. See, I can't even spread it out. See how fast it grabs it here? I can't even hardly spread it out. Let me put out a little bit more sealer here. And this surface grabs so quickly, so I can maybe put on a lot of sealer here. Let that soak into the cardboard if you're going to practice on this. I never like artists practicing on cardboard. I always say you practice on the surface you're going to paint, but you can do it. I mean, you got to do what you can afford to do, right? Right? Okay? And sometimes it's product availability. But if you're going to do that, you're going to want to put a sealer on here, and we'll let this dry and I'll show you. But watch what happens on an unsealed surface. If I take just a pure acrylic, okay, let's just take black here, and I go to put this black, and I put a little bit of water on it. First, you can see this as I stroke it like this. I can push really hard. I'll put in a little bit more paint. I'll push really hard. Then the brush runs out of paint. Do you see that right there? Okay. We call that a granulated surface. The surface the surface of the product here is grabbing the moisture out of the brush, so you can't get on a smooth coat. And you can see right here, it's already drying. See how fast that is drying right there? Okay? And right here, it's already dry. Right? It's already dry. See how fast that happens? It happens that fast on cardboard. It dries that fast. And you're not going to be able to do it, because you're not going to be able to blend anything or soften anything on cardboard, because not only is it air drying on top, air is going over it and drying it, it's pulling their surface is pulling the moisture right out of your paint, and it's drying it really, really fast. Okay, so that's why, I mean, you can see here it's still dry. It's almost, in just a couple minutes, it's almost completely dry here. Okay, now I'll take that same paint here over here, and I'll go let's just put a little bit of it right up here. Okay, and you can see I can move it over a little bit easier. It is eventually going to wear out, but I can move it over a little bit easier, and it won't dry as fast. Now if I spread it out, it will dry, but it won't dry as fast, because now I've locked off, not all, it's still absorptive, but I've locked off some of the properties of that wood, which is pulling the moisture in. Does that make sense? So when if you're gonna want to really blend something, and you want your acrylics to dry slower, you have to look at the drying from the top and the drying from the bottom. Does that make sense? So we have products like this. It's called the extender. This is the extender medium. Now, extender medium, unlike a lot of acrylics, this extender medium is inside this bottle of paint as well. So the two harmonize together. They work together chemically together. Okay? And that's why I say you can't always use extender medium with every single product that's out there, because it's not part of the chemistry of some of the acrylic paints. So it doesn't work, but it does with ours because it's part of ours. But as you can see, this is starting to lock off and dry. It's still wet. Okay, it's still wet, but it's starting to dry a little bit, especially here where I spanned it out. But if I take something like this, let's take a little bit of extender, okay? And let's paint in this area here of extender. Let's put some extender on here. Now, what is the extender going to do? Not only can I mix extender into paint, a lot of people mix it into paint, but one of the things you can do is use it to help slow down the second process of drying from underneath. So if I put some of this into the wood, it's gonna absorb into the wood here. You can see it absorbing. And then if I mix a little bit of this extender and brush mix it up pretty well into this paint here, and then I coat this on this time onto this surface here, that will be wet for a long time. And we'll just watch it, and I'll show you here through the video. And then also, the more paint you add, in other words, the more, and it's like anything, you know, if you put it on a little thicker, it'll dry a little bit. Now let's thin some of this out here. Let's draw this down and thin it out. But the other thing you see, I don't get that granulation. See how I'm not getting that granulation? That is because I'm locking off the absorptive qualities of the surface. Does that make sense? And it is very important, guys, because most frustration that comes from the artist is they'll change the surface. I'll paint one thing, and then you'll change the surface, go to something different, and then you say, I can't do it. Well, of course you can't, because you've changed the surface, so your surface is not the same as what I'm using, so your paints are going to react differently to how you're using it. Does that make sense? Okay? So let's take a look at here. See, this is completely dry. I don't care who you are, you can't blend on that. We'll take some of this thicker paint here, or we'll take some of this paint, we'll whip up a little bit of extender here, and you'll notice now that I've coated this right here with this, I can pull longer strokes right here like that on that paint, and I don't get that granulation here. But I can take, even with the extender here, I can take that and pull that here, and I get the granulation. Whereas over here, I won't get that granulation. The paint will smooth and go over that surface there. You can go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and you'll get that granulation. And you can look at it here. See, let's just hold it here. You can see it already starting to dry. See it grab matting? And over here, this paint is staying wet. What's the difference? This is where I put the sealer. This is not. There is no sealer here. So this is a little bit wet, but it's drying. Where over here, this is very wet. This is very wet. Does that make sense? Here. And so what I've done is I've altered the surface to control how it's drying, how my paints are going to dry on the surface. Okay? That is very important. Cardboard is very difficult. You can do it. You have to seal it off, but you can do it. And it is never as quite as nice as this. Now, see, look at this. This is dry, right? And over here, this is still wet. Very wet. Even the thin part over here is wet. It's very, very wet. And it's going to stay wet for a while. Even my extender over here is wet. This is all wet. This is beautiful wet. And glaze is really nice and stays wet. Because not only did I lock off some of the surface, but then I filled the surface one more time with something that's going to dry really, really slow, which is the extender. Does that make sense? And so your surface is so important. And I've done several videos on surface prep and stuff like that. But guys, your surface is so important. Your board preparation or your canvas preparation is so important. And this particular media, canvas prep medium, is made, we developed it so we all have the same type of surface. It's what I like to do. I like to paint on a board with this. Now, why don't I seal everything? Because I like, for example, let me show you the difference here. Okay, I'm going to take some yellow, a little bit of black. We'll make this olive green. Let's say I'm going to paint a leaf. And those of you that paint along with me, let's put a little blue in that today too. Okay, let's say you're going to paint a leaf. Okay, how I like to paint a leaf in a lot of the Paint It Simply is I like to put it on like this. I like it to absorb just for a second into the surface, and then I like to pull off like this, and I like to leave just that little, see how you get this pretty little dark right to a light in just 2 seconds, just boom. And because the matte surface here grabs a little bit of the paint and leaves what I call the memory of the original shape that's on there, right? And that works really, really well. Okay, so let me just add just a bit of moisture. This is drying up. So let's do the same thing over here on a sealed surface. So I put this on and I put this one on here. Let it dry for just a second. I come back to wipe it off and the whole leaf is gone. See the difference between the two? The whole leaf will move on you. You'll get a tiny bit, but you don't get it as controlled as this. So I come back and wipe anything, I'll start removing it. Now, that's great if you want to remove mistakes, because I can take a little water, I can take everything completely off. Why? Because nothing soaks into the surface. So when I paint, I like a little bit to soak into the surface. Does that make sense? And then I like to wipe it back, because that just makes it look like I painted really quickly a blended leaf. And all I did was paint a leaf. All I did was take this color and I, paint on the shape of a leaf or any kind of shape of leaf that I want to have here. I like a little granulations. Wait for just a second. Clean my finger a bit here. Wait for just a second and then pull back onto the leaf like that. And the more I pull, I can pull it off, leaving just a little bit of the memory. And that quickly paints the leaf. So I control the technique I'm painting with how I prep that surface. Does that make sense? And in Paint It Simply, I like this way because I like to pull things off and do stuff. All right, let's blend, okay? So we have a surface here that has some paint on it. It's not like cardboard. If I come in here and try to blend on cardboard, well, look at this. You can see it's still wet over here, still a little bit wet, but completely dry in these other areas. Even where I took this paint, put it over there, it's completely dry. But where the sealer is, it's still a little bit wet. And that's on cardboard. One of the hardest surfaces acrylics have to work on is cardboard. Okay, but on the wood, look at this over here. On the wood, this is still wet. This is all still wet. All of it completely wet, because I locked off the grain. I put on just a little bit of extender and I worked the colors there. So you can keep your colors wet. And this is one product. There is Derivan a couple years ago developed this one, and it is amazing for extending your dry. I can keep my acrylics open for 3-4 hours working time with that. I have one that I keep. This is a specialized one that I make for doing portraits and stuff. This is gelled extender, and I'll show you all about that, how I make it as well. And it can keep your acrylics wet for days, for several days on your palette and stuff too as well. There's lots of things, guys. Don't get frustrated with acrylics. You just need to know some of the things about how to use it. But let's talk about blending with acrylics here for just a second, okay, before I get this video too long, okay? But guys, there's ways. Okay, that's what I want to tell you. Don't get frustrated with them. Some acrylics are not made to do this. For years, I developed product lines of acrylics as a chemist for other paint companies that they wanted them to dry fast, hard, and flexible. And that's what we did it. We did that. Those types of bottled acrylics can't do these types of paintings. They're not designed to do that. They're designed to do crafting products where you want them to dry fast, hard, and stay flexible if they're going to be painted on paper or something like that. These are not. These particular acrylics are made to be adjusted. For example, here, see this right here? This is dry, okay? A bottled acrylic sometimes we put in, depending on farming, a little bit of vinyl, which causes it to dry harder, faster. And that vinyl repels any kind of water coming up into it, okay? These acrylics are not made to do that. They have none of that in it. So I can take a little bit of water right here and push it on this right here, and you can see I can reconstitute the black here. Push it around, and I can work into that black. Matter of fact, I can keep working it like this. The more I work it, the more I reconstitute that black. You cannot do this with several different types of acrylics. So you saw this all dry there, right? I can push a little bit of white right here. I can take just a touch of water and I can push it in and start blending in the grays right here. See that? I can push in and blend grays right into it. Now, you can't do this forever. You can only do it for a couple of hours here until the acrylic starts to dry harder. But see, if I wanted to make some values of gray here, I can work right into my blacks here and work softer values and blend out to a beautiful gray, even though that black was dry. And it'll work over here on this one too that is still wet. And you can see I can work that and blend that one still right here with no problem. No problem whatsoever. Okay? And all you have to do is know the properties of your acrylics. So these acrylics, here it is, will do this for a couple hours. If I wanted to come in and work on something, I can just by reconstituting it with its medium. Now, you can say, oh, okay, can I do this with extender? Here's your extender, right? Can I do this with extender? Can I come in and blend with the extender on top of this? No. Extenders will not. Let's try to take a clear finger. If I put the extender on here and try to do that, it won't do it. See? It won't move that color at all. Once your acrylic is dry, extender no longer works. No longer works on it, okay? But what will work on that, we'll find a clean finger here. Take water, push that in there, and water will reconstitute it and move it. You can see it. Pick up the green, reconstitute the green, and work it. Because water is your solvent. Extender keeps it from drying, but once it's dry, extender no longer works. Okay, so a lot of people say, oh, I put in more extender and I tried to blend with it and it didn't work. No, it won't. Water will. After it starts to dry, water will. So if I come in here and you can see this is already starting to dry, and I can take some extender on this and work this through here, and it's not going to do anything. Maybe a little bit, we're still a little bit wet. But if I really want to move it, I use water, and water will move it instantly. See the difference? here, okay? And this is just knowing what your acrylics can do. So let's say, for example, let's just say I'm going to paint. Let's just paint real quick here. You know, maybe a soft yellow or, you know, black and a little bit of red here, brownish color. Let's put some of this in. We won't use any extender. We're going to use just water, okay? I like to start out my students in all my beginning classes with just water and paint and teach them how water works inside a paint. So let's come back up over here and let's just say we're going to do like a peach or something like that. Okay, now this is grabbing my surface here really quickly. So I can add a little bit of water and cause that and use that to help smooth it out if I want to. Because what's happening? The water is just going into the surface really quick. I mean, it's being pulled into the surface. I add more water, it gets pulled in more, right? Let's put in a light color over on the other side here. Let's go with a light color right up over here. Now, I'm going to come into this channel and I'm going to teach you how to paint beautiful peaches. Now, so I have this and I have this. Now, I can blend those together. You can see, I can even take my finger like this and lightly just work that color because these are artist grade acrylics and I can just start the blending right there with my finger. Okay. Now, we sell very expensive brushes, so you want to use those first. But I used to teach my students how to blend with your finger, how to blend with a paper towel. So here I just use my finger, and I can just softly, I'm feeling the surface. If I feel the surface start to dry a little bit, I'll just take a little bit of water right into my finger, and I'll work that across, and I can softly blend that all out. And we'll let that dry for a minute, and you can see that. So I can do that. Okay, but that's not how I like to paint. What I showed you with that rose on the previous video to this is how to create a halftone. So I would never blend these two together. They're too far apart. You have one that's up in, up here, and you have one that's down here. And I always say never blend or never put colors that are more than 2 spaces apart from each other. So I would do this. I would come in and grab, watch that dark, I will grab one right about in here and I will add that one in there first. That one in there right now starts your blending. Does that make sense? And I can even start to let that dry up here. I don't have to worry about it. I'll just sit here and talk for a minute because there's a lot of hot air here. I'll talk for just a minute. I'll let that start to dry up here, okay? And I don't have to worry about it because I can blend it because I'm using an acrylic, a professional grade acrylic that is designed to do this. Now what I'll do is I'll just wipe some of that extra out of my brush. Let's just pick up a little bit of water. This time let's add some more water to that medium color. So I have thin, but I have a lot of water. That water is important because that water is your solvent. Does that make sense? And see how I can just come through and blend on that, soften it out. Let's, right in here, I want to pull I look at it, do you want the dark to go further or the light? I want the light to come across a little bit, so I pick up a little water and I add it to my light color here. I'll thin this out, so I have just mostly water and a little bit of light color. And I'll use that. I'll pull down. And if I feel like I have it too much, just a bit, I just pinch wipe my brush and I'll pull this across and I'll just softly work that color. Let's get rid of that little edge right there. And all of a sudden, I've blended really easy that ball here. I am feeling the surface. I'm using a brush that's designed to do this. This is a fusion brush. My touch is very light. And I understand that water is my solvent. And so I've got to be real, and I don't need that much. But let's say I wanted to smooth this out even more. I'd let all this dry, and then I'd do it one more time. Let's grab a little water and some more of this dark. Matter of fact, let's make it a little bit darker. Let's come over here, add a little more red, a little more black. Slightly different. Let's take it towards a peachy color on that side over there, like we would do with a peach here. And I'll push some of that color on here, onto this side. Boom. Now I want to soften that out. Here, I'll just pinch wipe that color off, and I'll go back towards this more yellow medium with a little bit of water into it, and I just pull it along there like that, and I've softened it off. Okay. Now I'm blending that without using any extender, which will make it even easier yet, because the extender here will stay wet. See how this is still wet up here? The extender is still wet. Okay. And we're 30 minutes into this since I put that on, because I put this extender, I don't know if you can see that, but you see the extender where I put it there, that's still all wet. Okay. That's what extender does. But you have to understand what extender does. You don't just add it to paint. You can put it in different parts of your technique and really extend it. Does that make sense? Okay, if I understand it. Now I got this little edge right here. I want to blend that off because I like super smooth. So I'll just come in there, and that's my medium value. I'll add some water right to my medium value. I don't need very much in my brush, just a little bit. And I'll just touch through it. And I'll smooth that off. Boom, boom, boom. Right there like that. If I want to walk the light color across, I touch into a little water, grab a little bit of white, a light color. Let's refine our light color with another dose. When I think I've got about enough there, I'll just thin off my color, go back towards my medium tone and work that in. And when I get towards the darker tone, I'll work towards the darker tone. Here, we'll soften that out. Here. Boom, like that. And as I go further down towards that other peachy color, I'll work that in. And all of a sudden, using just pure acrylic, I've painted that thing really easy. Does that make sense? Now, it looks really easy. That takes practice. It takes practice, because what generally happens to all of us out there is we grab this light and we start walking it across, and all of a sudden we ruin it because we walk the right light all the way across. It doesn't ruin it. It just means you have to use another technique to take it out. But I didn't use any extenders. Let's say I got a little bit, I want to smooth that out right there. I look for the shadow color that I had there. I just take a little bit of water into my shadow color. See, my shadow color is drying up because I'm painting acrylic. And I just add a little water to it, and I'll smooth that off right there, right where I want that. Let's smooth that out a little bit there. Let's go to a little bit of that medium color right in there. We'll add that in, smooth that out, and lift up the pressure. Your brush is so important. That's why we have these brushes. These are the fusion brushes, super soft brushes for doing this. And let's go over here and add a little bit of light, pull down the light on that side, and I will start to get a more smoother effect to that. Okay, now how I go to paint these over here. So that's the kind of technique that I use in painting this type of peach that you see here. It starts to get smoother and smoother and smoother. And, you know, I'm very careful with my colors, my tones, and I work. It's the Dutch technique. They work very thin layers, one layer up on top of the other, and they actually let each layer dry. So if I wanted to come in with a little more red, let's say a little bit more reddish kind of color, maybe turn this just a touch brown with some yellow. You'll learn all of this on this channel as I start to talk to you about it. We'll brown it with just a touch of the black. We'll brown that up. Okay, so a softer but a little bit more red. We can push that color right in here on the side of that peach. Boom, right like that. Okay, and I put that stroke on. Let's even go a little bit more, because we feel brave today. Let's push a little bit more onto that. Okay, now I've got this edge that's right here, right? And it's no different than what I tell you is a halftone. Since I got a lot of that color on my brush, I'm going to rinse it out for a second. Okay, so I have just water in my brush, just some water. And then I'm going to look to my medium tone, which is right here. And I'll put just a little bit of it, just thinly into this brush. And that's all I need to come through and just pull through and work and start to soften that out. Every once in a while, pinch wipe some of that color out of your brush, because you'll pick it up, see? You'll pick it up and you'll just drag it. So pinch wipe that off here and just work this back and forth a couple of times, and you smooth that color out. Let's put a little bit more red down there. Now I'll come back in and drop in a little red spot right down there. Little bit further down, right down in there. Now I'll come back, take some, let's rinse that heavy red out. Let's just take a little water, a little bit of this, thin of this color that's right there, and just pull through a bit and soften that out. Now, what you have to be careful of, and let's just soften this out with a little bit of that medium yellow. What you have to be careful of is coming back sometimes with the acrylic too soon. And when you come back with the acrylic too soon, if you haven't, you can use water and you can do this. You can pull a hole right into it really easy, you know, and that's why I always say sometimes it's best to wait for about 10, 15 minutes for it to start to tack up a little bit better. And that's an important point. I'm going to say it again. Sometimes it's best not to keep going, to stop for a minute, go get a cup of coffee, come back, let it dry up 10 or 15 minutes so that so your brush going over the surface doesn't pull those holes. It will happen as you start to build up a lot of layers of paint, and those paint layers are soft. Does that make sense? Okay? And if you ever start to pull a hole, it's easy to fix. Darn, you just take some of your color. Let's just go back. We just have to come close. We don't even have to have the same color. We can just come close with a little bit of our color here. We'll mix up some yellow, some red, some black here. And a little more black keeps it from going quite so greenish here. So we'll just mix up a medium bit of that color here and check that. That's just a touch light. So we add just a touch of red, touch of black. And this is if you want it. I don't ever paint like this anymore because I like movement and stuff to my paints. So I just want to darken this down just a bit. So you see it's a little bit darker. I'll pinch wipe my brush. I don't need that much on there. And I can just wipe this through and fix that little hole right there easily. Just boom, 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 boom. And you can do that. And you can come back up here. Let's say you wanted to work a lighter highlight. Come back, pick up some white, pick up some yellow. Let's put a lighter highlight right up here. Boom, put that on, right? Then wipe that extra off your brush. Maybe pick up a little bit of water. Come over here, grab anything that's neutral, anything that's closer to where you are, and just start wiping through. Now, don't go blending all the way down through here because that white will travel on you. What I like to do, just like with that rose, is halftone, halftone, halftone. If I'm right up here, I want to go here. Does that make sense? Or maybe even a touch of this time. Put that in my brush, and it will soften out fast and not drag that white. Does that make sense? So I can come back there. I got just a little bit of smoothness I can do up there. If I want to paint it just like glass, I can just tap it like this and really blend that out. Okay, let's move this white over just a bit. Blend that out. See how quick and easy you can blend it. And then I can put a little water, a little bit of my shadow over here to the top side, soften that out. Let's put a little more yellow over there. Maybe a little bit more brighter yellow right in there would be pretty. And all of a sudden, you start to paint a bright, happy, sunlit little, peach, if that's what you want to do, having something like that. What I like is what I do over here with all this modeling of color. I like to paint what we call halftones. So I can paint all of this, and I can paint it all smooth, and I know I can do that. But the way I like to paint is to come back, and I'll do it acrylic. Sometimes I do it extended acrylics. Acrylics that dry slower. But I will come back up and I start to leave marks. So I like to leave a mark like that. And then I start heading down. Here, a little red, tiny bit of black. I start heading down through my values here of what I want. And I move my brush around like this. And I leave the marks. So let's put a little lighter, brighter yellow right up there. Boom, maybe restate this again here. Maybe a little bit more. This is how I like to paint now. I like to leave, these are called marks. But my marks always work around and around and around, see? And so I'm going to soften this edge here, but I I don't want to blend it out too much. I like to leave the mark. I go down this way, grab a little bit of this, put that mark right in there. Boom, maybe just round some of my marks here, and I'll leave this. See that movement that's right there. That's a little distracting, so I'll come up here, maybe add just a bit of yellow to that, and just move a mark right in here. And what I'm doing is I'm working the value scale, light to dark, but this time I'm working around and I'm not blending it as much. And I'll work light areas, shadow areas, and leave little colors. Let's say I wanted to have a little bit more of a yellowish right in there, or orange. I'll come up here right about with the value. You'll learn this later. This is called broken color. I'll put in a little bit of that color right in there like that. Now I want to soften that, right, that color right in there. Maybe I want just a bit more, maybe a little more red right in some areas of that. Boom. Now I want to soften that. Sometimes I'll just push that with my finger, soften that, and I'll head towards the touch of that violet that I used there and just add that into that. Sometimes I like to just push my finger so I don't blend it too much, and so I can start adding all these other little tones around there. Now, you're seeing me, watching me paint this thing all with complete acrylics. I have a couple of hours to paint like this on this board before those acrylics go dry. And even if they go, so see, look right here. See this? This is now pretty much dry. It's been 41 minutes, right? It's still wet right here. That black is still wet right there. But if I take just the tiniest bit of water right here, I can work right in there and blend that out. So I'm 41 minutes into this, putting that on there, and I can still work that. Does that make sense? So if you understand the acrylics, especially modern acrylics, you can do all this. And, you know, I want to soften right in here. This is drying right up here. But all I need is a little bit of that medium color. And do I use extender or water? All I need is water. If it's dry, I need to use water to reconstitute it. Does that make sense? If I want to keep it wet, I use extender. But that's dry. So I use a little bit of water and a little bit of that color. And I just do this. And I'll leave some of these little marks there. And that makes a pretty little peach. Just like that. You can come through with just a damp brush and touch into that and have a whole bunch of fun, okay? But the main thing that's important here, guys, especially for you beginners, you're going to go through frustration, okay? It's going to happen. Welcome to the arts. I've had frustration for 40 years. Because I'm constantly pushing myself to learn new things. And every time you're learning something new, you're going to get frustrated. And like my mentor, my teacher told me back in 1987, he said, if you're not frustrated, you're not learning. Frustration is part of learning because you're doing something that you can't do, you've never done before. So there's a process for learning that. And part of that process, is frustration. Does that make sense? And then so you figure out what it is that you're doing wrong. You run through everything. If I'm right here, and if I want to put white on here and blend into this without touching anything, can I just put extender on there and do that? No. Extender won't blend it. Extender doesn't do anything because it's dry. Does that make sense? So what do I have to do? Water. So I'll take my white acrylic right here. I'll put my white right down on there. Right? Now, the way I'd blend it, let me show you how I do it, is I would then take the white and this. I don't ask myself to blend this right into here. I can, just with that water. You can see it. I can do it. Boom, I can. See, I can do it. That's okay. I can do that. Okay? But that takes a lot of work. What I like to do is I'll take my white, I'll take up, just like I did on that rose. If you haven't watched that rose video, go watch that rose video. I take and I make a value right between the two. So if I'm up here with a 1, I'm up here with a 10, I'm looking for a 5. And I'll come up here with that 5, and I'll push that 5 right there. And you can see with that 5, I get halfway there. Now see how I love to paint is I love that mark That's what I like on the peaches and stuff. I like that mark. And so to soften that, I go towards my white slightly, and I make a value right between those two. This is called the halftone. And I just take a little mark, and I soften it. And as I go the other way, I make a value right between the two, and I soften this into the black. Here. And then I'll go back and forth with smaller marks. Maybe I want more white right here. Okay? But at some point in time, I can just take my brush, rinse it out real good, have just a damp brush, and I can come through if I want to blend it all, and blend all of that together for a smoothness all the way across. That's called halftone painting, and that's my favorite way to paint with acrylics because I can paint really fast. I make the scales here up and down. Certainly you can blend black and white together, and you can come back later and blend it. So that entire peach that's right there, I didn't use any extender. I didn't use anything to slow down the drying times of the acrylics. I used the regular acrylics. I could, definitely. But an acrylic, if a properly made acrylic that is made, this is the difference, guys. It is made, this acrylic is made to do this. This acrylic does not become hard for a couple of hours. So it's made to do this. Other acrylics are made to come hard in 15 minutes, and you cannot do it with it, okay? So that's the difference between that. So we'll paint some fun things together. I'll show you, and I will show you in future videos. I will show you painting with the extender and everything. In this video, I want you to learn a couple concepts. First off, halftone, just like I showed you on that rose. And we had that rose. Where did I put that rose? That rose is right back here. So you have this rose, right? So go watch that video. And I turned those marks into this rose. Halftone painting. That's very, very valuable. This right here that you see is all done with acrylics. See? It's all painted with acrylics. Just like this one. This one's all acrylics. I think I used a little extender into that one. But you can paint them wet into wet. I'll show you those techniques. You can paint them alla prima. You can paint them thick. You can do whatever. Acrylics are amazing things today. The new generation acrylics are amazing things, and they can do all of this, and you can do it, okay? With a little bit of knowledge. So, you know, your surface here. So, one last thing here where I put this on, let me show you the surface. So, if I draw across this surface here, you see it starts to get granulation quite a bit, right? And let me take some of that paint and draw it right across here. You see it does not happen as fast. It goes longer here. And I can smooth it out easier here. See the smoothness that I get here than I do here. It doesn't do it. You can hear me rubbing it. It doesn't do it. And so I use this, I lock off the surface anytime I want to do washes or glazes or, you know, evening sunsets, or I want to really glaze on some color, smooth it out and glaze it. It's very easy on a surface that has been sealed off with sealer. Whereas if I do that same thing over here, it doesn't work as easy. You get more lines and stuff like that. Understanding your surface. That's one of the things I want to do in this video. How your acrylics are going to blend first is dependent upon how you treated your surface. Okay? How you treated your surface is going to be very important. Painting on cardboard is about one of the hardest things that you can, most difficult thing is because it sucks all the moisture right out. What's the drying part? Acrylics will stay wet. You can work with them. They dry. You can't work with them. Cardboard sucks that moisture right out of there and increases the drying time. Does that make sense? Okay, so we learned that. We learned that extender can keep it wet, but extender cannot reconstitute and blend. Water is your friend, okay? Water is the friend of acrylics. And then also working through the values, just like I showed you on that rose. Learning to work through the halftones is how an acrylic artist blends more than anything else. Because you can make something look really, really blend. And see, this is all completely dry here. And I can still blend on top of that thing with no problem. And I can come over. If I wanted to smooth that out, I'll just show you. Now, that's well dry. Because the Heritage is designed to do this, guys. I can come right in here and I can run a damp brush over this and watch what happens. As the water goes into that paint, now I can come in. If I want this to be absolutely smooth, I have a couple hours to do this. I can just take water and do this and start smoothing that out even more, because the paint's designed to do that. Does that make sense? Not all acrylics are designed to do that. All right? Okay, so we'll continue on. I'll go paint some fun things with you guys, but first, before we do anything, we have to understand the acrylics, and hopefully you understand a little bit more about the acrylics. As we move along in this channel, I'm going to explain a lot more to you and what some of the differences are, and then open the doors to a lot of possibilities. But there will be frustration because you're learning. Does that make sense? Okay. I'll see you guys on the next one.